When I said, with my heart full of joy, "Daughter, I'm so happy about your wedding tomorrow," I expected her to smile, maybe even tear up like she used to when she was little, and I'd tell her how proud I was. But instead, she went completely silent. My daughter, Alma, froze mid-step, and the man she married, Theodore, let out a short, smug laugh. That sound, it wasn't nervous or polite. It was cruel, mocking. I remember standing there, holding a wine bottle in one hand, expecting her to say something like, "Oh, Dad, it's a surprise." But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Dad." The wedding was last week. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. Last week. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. My ears rang as I looked between them. I'd spent the last 2 months planning every detail, giving them $45,000. My retirement savings, because I wanted her day to be magical. The Desert Botanical Garden was already booked. The caterer paid, the band confirmed. Everything was ready, and now they were standing in front of me, telling me it had already happened. Without me. Theodore stepped closer, acting like this was some kind of casual announcement. "We had a small private ceremony in Sedona," he said, hands in his pockets, confidence oozing off him like oil. "Just the two of us and an officiant. More spiritual, more intimate." I couldn't look at him. My eyes found Alma's instead, my little girl, the one I raised alone after her mother passed away, the one I promised I'd always show up for. And she couldn't even look me in the eye. The air felt heavy. My heart thudded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Finally, I managed to ask, "What about the money, Alma?" "The $45,000 I gave you for the wedding?" Theodore answered before she could. "We made different choices with the funds," he said, in that same self-satisfied tone that made my skin crawl. "Used it for our honeymoon in Maui. Better investment for our future. Don't you think?" That was the moment something in me cracked. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Every plate I'd set on the dinner table for that night blurred in front of me. The roast still in the oven, the napkins I'd ironed just hours before, the wine glasses shining under the light. My daughter, my only child, had married the man I warned her about, taken my money, and left me standing here like a fool waiting for a wedding that would never come. And as Theodore's smirk widened, I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. The oven timer started to beep in the background, sharp and impatient, but I couldn't move, couldn't think. The only thing I could feel was the pulse in my neck pounding like a hammer. I finally said it, my voice lower than I expected. "You spent my money on a vacation?" Theodore gave a careless shrug like it was a simple misunderstanding, not betrayal. "Honeymoon," he corrected, walking past me and glancing around my living room like he owned the place. 3 weeks at the Grand Walia. "You'd understand if you traveled more." That smirk, that tone. It was like he wanted to see how far he could push me. Alma stood near the table, twisting her fingers, staring down at the floor. "Dad, please. We just wanted something small, simple, less pressure." "Pressure?" I repeated. My hands gripped the back of a chair. "You mean the pressure of including your father in your life?" Her lip trembled, but she still didn't meet my eyes. "You let me believe," I said quietly. "For weeks you let me think I was walking you down that aisle. You took my calls, you smiled, you lied. All while you were planning to leave me out of it completely." Theodore finally looked up from his phone, sighing dramatically. "We didn't lie, Jazz. We just changed plans. You're overreacting. We're adults. We get to make our own decisions now." Overreacting. The word hit like gasoline on fire. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "Everything I saved." "I worked 30 years fixing engines, staying up late to pay for your college, for your rent for this wedding. And you're telling me I'm overreacting because I expected to be there?" Theodore laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic." That was it. The thin line of patience that had held me together my entire life snapped. "Get out," I said. Alma's head shot up. "Dad, please." "Both of you, get out of my house." She took a step toward me, eyes filling with tears. "We just wanted to explain." "There's nothing to explain." I walked to the door and opened it, the heavy July air spilling inside. "You made your choices. Now live with them." Theodore rolled his eyes but stood, still trying to act composed. "You'll regret this," he muttered, slipping his phone into his pocket. "We'll come back when you've calmed down." "I'm calm," I said, my voice like ice. "That's the problem. They hesitated for a moment, then Alma walked out first, her heels clicking against the porch steps. Theodore followed, pausing just long enough to smirk again. When I shut the door, the sound of the deadbolt locking echoed through the house like a gunshot. The roast still burned in the oven. The table sat waiting for a celebration that would never happen. And I stood there in my own house, feeling like a stranger in a life I'd built for everyone but myself. The house felt too quiet after they left. Not peaceful quiet, the heavy kind. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes you realize just how alone you really are. The oven timer was still going, a shrill, endless beep that filled every corner of the room. I walked to the kitchen, turned the knob, and opened the oven door. Smoke rolled out. The roast I'd seasoned that afternoon, the one I'd spent hours preparing for a dinner that never happened, was burned to a crisp. I turned off the heat and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just food that burned tonight. It was trust, pride, love. Without saying a word, I grabbed the oven mitt, slid the pan out and set it in the sink. The sizzle of grease hitting cold metal was the only sound left in the house. Then I went to my office. The small room at the end of the hallway had always been my space. Tools, files, ledgers, a man's world of order and memory. I switched on the desk lamp, the same one I'd used since the early 90s, and reached for the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It always stuck halfway. Tonight it fought harder than usual. When it finally gave way, the sound echoed like something snapping loose in my chest. I pulled out the folder marked Alma Financial. Inside were years of documents, college loans I'd paid off, car payments I'd covered when she first moved to Phoenix, rent receipts from that little apartment she swore she'd pay me back for. She never did. At the very back of the folder was the latest wire transfer, $45,000, moved just 3 months ago to her joint account with Theodore. My money, the one meant to give my daughter the dream wedding she'd always wanted, not a spiritual sunset in Sedona that she never even invited me to. My hand shook slightly as I set the papers down. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast. This was something colder, deeper, the kind of hurt that sits in your bones and changes how you breathe. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the wall of framed photos above my desk. Alma's high school graduation, her first car, her college acceptance letter. Every picture was a piece of me I'd given away, smiling, proud, unaware that one day she'd take the last piece and walk out the door, without a backward glance. Then something in my mind clicked. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. If Theodore thought I was just an old man with soft hands and an empty wallet, he had another thing coming. Because what they didn't know was that the account they used for that honeymoon wasn't just a wire transfer. It was linked, tracked. I handled all the transfers myself, and I knew exactly how to reverse one. I opened my laptop, the familiar hum filling the silence. My banking portal blinked to life. They might have stolen my money, but I was about to take back my dignity, and a whole lot more. The soft glow of the computer screen filled the dark room as I logged in. The hum of the old desktop fan was the only thing breaking the silence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time, steady, deliberate. Then I clicked on the transfer records. There it was, the $45,000 wire, sent from my account to Alma and Theodore Caldwell Joint Savings. My throat tightened. Seeing my daughter's name beside his like that felt heavier than I expected. I clicked deeper. The next line stopped me cold. They'd moved nearly all of it again. $43,200 straight into another account. Not a honeymoon fund. Not a house deposit. A business account in Theodore's name. Caldwell Executive Catering, LLC. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under me. So that was the plan. Not just betrayal, but a calculated one. They used my money to fund his latest business venture, the same man who'd already burned through 2 failed startups in 3 years. The same man who smiled in my living room and told me I was overreacting. My hands clenched slowly into fists. But I didn't yell, didn't throw anything. I'd learned long ago that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest one. Instead, I opened a different tab, business registration records for the state of Arizona. I typed in the name, registered under Theodore's name alone, filed 1 month after I wired the funds, but the registration fee and the initial deposit, paid directly from my transfer. My name was right there on the bank slip, listed as the originating source. I let out a low whistle. He'd basically started his business with my money, legally tied to my transaction. That meant I had leverage. A lot of it. Then another idea hit me. One I knew would sting far worse than any argument or confrontation. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Martha Jennings, the family attorney who'd handled my wife's estate years ago, a woman who didn't waste words. When she picked up, her voice came calm and sharp as ever. "Jazz, haven't heard from you in a while." "Evening, Martha," I said, trying to sound casual, though my heart was pounding. "Need your advice on something. Family related." She could probably hear it in my voice, that restrained edge of a man who's been pushed too far. "Tell me what happened," she said simply. I explained everything. The money, the fake wedding, the betrayal, and the new business Theodore had started with my funds. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said, "You want my professional opinion or my personal one?" "Both." "Professionally," she began, "since your funds were used for a registered business, you can file an ownership claim. You'd have every right to seize assets or dissolve the company until repayment. Personally," she paused, "I'd make them sweat first. Let them realize what losing you really means." Her words hit like a spark to dry tinder. "Thanks, Martha," I said, my voice steady again. "That's exactly what I'll do." After hanging up, I opened a new document on my laptop, a formal notice of ownership claim. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was the first domino. I filled in every detail, line by line, making sure it was airtight. When I finished, I leaned back, staring at the glow of the screen. They thought they'd taken my money and my dignity. But all they'd really done was hand me proof of their greed, written, signed, and time-stamped. And as I shut the laptop, I made myself a quiet promise. They'd come back soon, not for forgiveness, but because they'd need me. And when they did, they'd see exactly who they underestimated. 3 weeks passed. The days blurred together in the dry Arizona heat, but I didn't forget a thing. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and opened my laptop, watching quietly as Theodore's little empire started to rot from the inside out. I didn't lift a finger to stop it. I didn't need to. It started small. A local magazine ran a glowing piece about Caldwell Executive Catering, calling it a fresh culinary vision backed by family investors. I chuckled when I read that line, family investors. If only they knew. Then the cracks began to show. Their first event, high-profile corporate brunch for a tech firm in Scottsdale, went viral for all the wrong reasons. A guest had filmed one of the servers dropping an entire tray of champagne flutes. The clip hit social media, and within 48 hours, Caldwell Catering was trending for all the wrong reasons. But the real damage came quietly through numbers. I'd filed my ownership notice exactly as Martha advised. Quiet, strategic, airtight. It meant every payment Theodore's company received was now flagged under ownership dispute. Vendors got nervous. Clients backed out. Their payment processor froze their merchant account pending verification. And because Theodore hadn't listed Alma's name anywhere on the registration, he couldn't even use her as a co-signer to move money. They were trapped. On the morning of the 4th week, I got a call. Unknown number, but I knew the voice immediately. "Dad, it's Alma." There was a tremor in her voice I hadn't heard since she was little, when she'd fall off her bike and try not to cry. "I didn't expect you to call," I said, keeping my tone even. "I know," she whispered. "Dad, I'm sorry. Things have been bad. The business," she stopped. I could hear Theodore's muffled voice in the background, irritated, barking orders at someone. "We're losing everything, Dad. The accounts are locked. Clients are canceling. Theodore says someone must have filed something against us." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The desert sky was golden, calm. "Interesting," I said softly. "Maybe you should talk to your business partner about that." Silence. "Dad," she said again, almost breaking. "Please, we made a mistake." "I made a mistake. Theodore said it was temporary, that he'd pay you back." I should have known better. For the first time, her voice didn't sound entitled or defensive. It sounded human, small. "Alma," I said quietly, "do you remember when you were 8? You broke the side mirror on my old pickup with your bike. You cried for hours. But what did I tell you?" She sniffled. "You said things can be fixed, but trust takes longer." "That's right," I paused. "And here's the problem, sweetheart. You didn't just break a mirror this time. You shattered something you can't glue back together overnight." She was crying now, trying to speak but failing. I could hear Theodore in the background again, his voice sharp. impatient, blaming her for everything. The same man she'd chosen over me. Then the sound of a door slamming. She must have walked away. "He's different now," she said, almost whispering. "Cold, angry, we fight every day. I don't even recognize him anymore." "That's what greed does," I said simply. "It strips people down to what they really are." "Dad, please," she said through tears. "We can't pay the rent. The catering company's collapsing. Can you at least help us get through this? Please, Dad, I'll do anything." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I wanted to. Every instinct in me screamed to protect her, to make it right. But then I remembered standing by that door weeks ago, her face blank. Theodore's smirk as he told me I'd get over it. No, this time they needed to feel it. "I can't fix what you broke, Alma," I said quietly. "But maybe losing everything is what it'll take for you to understand what really matters." She sobbed quietly. "Please, Dad." "I'll think about it," I said, then ended the call. The silence after was deafening, but for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. They'd built their world on lies, and now it was crumbling exactly the way lies always do. That evening, as the sun sank over the mountains, I took a slow walk through my backyard, letting the desert wind brush against my face. I wasn't a cruel man. I never had been. But sometimes mercy needs to wait until truth does its work. And I knew, soon enough, they'd come to my door again. Not as deceivers, not as beggars, but as broken people ready to finally understand who I really was. And when that day came, I'd be ready. It was a Friday evening, 5 weeks after the night they walked out of my house. The sun had just started to sink behind the red hills, washing the neighborhood in that soft, dusty gold that only Arizona can pull off. The air smelled faintly of mesquite and rain, though the sky hadn't broken in months. I was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, an old blues record humming faintly through the open window behind me. That quiet, familiar rhythm was the only company I needed anymore. Then came a knock. Not loud, hesitant, the kind that carries shame. I didn't even have to stand up to know who it was. I'd been expecting it. I set my glass down, let the screen door creak open, and there they were. Alma and Theodore, except they didn't look like the polished, confident couple who once stood here laughing at me. They looked wrecked. Theodore's shirt was wrinkled, his eyes hollowed with exhaustion. Alma's mascara was smudged, her hair tangled, her hands trembling around a small purse. For a moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the cicadas buzzing in the distance. Finally, I broke the silence. "You look like you've both seen better days." Theodore's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He didn't have the energy. Alma stepped forward instead. "Dad, please, we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You had your chance to talk 5 weeks ago. I believe your exact words were, 'We're independent now.'" Her face crumpled, tears spilling before she could stop them. I know. We were wrong. So wrong. I don't even know what we were thinking. Theodore said he had everything under control, but..." Theodore's voice cracked in. "It wasn't my fault, Jazz. The system froze the funds." I raised my hand slightly, cutting him off. "Don't." My tone was calm, but sharp enough to slice through his excuses. "You built a business on money that wasn't yours. You lied to me, lied to Alma's family, and then you stood in my house and told me I was overreacting. So don't stand on my porch pretending this is bad luck. This is consequence." He looked away, his face red with a mix of shame and anger. Alma reached for my arm, her voice breaking. "Dad, please. We lost everything. The business is gone. The landlord's evicting us. And Theodore's car got repossessed. I don't even know where to go." I studied her face. The fear there wasn't just financial. It was human. The kind that comes when your pride collapses, and you finally see how small your choices have made you. "I warned you about him," I said softly. "Not because I wanted to control you, but because I've lived long, enough to recognize a man who confuses charm with character." Theodore finally looked up. His voice was low, but still carried a sliver of arrogance. "We just need a loan, Jazz. Something small to get back on our feet. You've got money. It's not like you'll miss it." I almost laughed. There it was, the tone, the entitlement that got them here in the first place. "You still don't get it," I said quietly. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about respect, something you can't buy, no matter how much you think you deserve it." He opened his mouth again, but Alma cut him off this time. "Theo, stop, please." She turned to me, desperation raw in her eyes. "Dad, I'll do anything. I'll pay you back, every cent. I'll work for it. I'll take a second job. I just can't lose everything. Please don't turn me away." Her words hit hard. I could feel the ache behind them. The little girl she once was, the one who used to wait for me at the shop with a sandwich and a hug, flickered for a moment in her eyes. I took a long breath, then another. "Alma," I said, my voice softer now. "I told you once that trust takes longer to fix than anything else. You're asking me to forget what you did, but I can't. What I can do is help you remember who you are." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, stepping aside from the doorway, "you can stay here for now. Just you, not him." Theodore's head snapped up. "What? You can't—" "I can," I said firmly. "This is my home, and I'll help my daughter get back on her feet. But I won't have a man who stole from me sleeping under my roof." Alma turned toward Theodore, panic flashing across her face. "Theo!" But he just shook his head, his pride too thick to swallow. "You're seriously choosing him over me?" he spat. "After everything I did for us?" I almost smiled at the irony. "Everything you did for you, you mean?" He stared at me for a moment longer, his jaw tight, then turned on his heel and stormed off toward the car parked at the curb. Alma stood there in the doorway, shoulders shaking, watching him leave. Then slowly she looked back at me, eyes red, voice trembling. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I said gently. "Just come inside. It's getting dark." She stepped in, hesitant at first, and as the door closed behind her, I felt the faintest trace of something shift in the air. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of it. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel so empty. I poured her a glass of water, set it on the table beside her, and sat down across from her. She stared at her hands for a long time before whispering, "Thank you." I nodded once. "We're not done yet, Alma, but we'll start here." Outside, the cicadas sang louder. The night settled in, and somewhere in the distance, I imagined, Theodore's car fading into the desert road, a man still too proud to realize he'd just lost everything that truly mattered. 2 months passed since the night Alma stood trembling on my porch. The heat had softened, and the desert wind carried the promise of autumn. Cool nights, quiet mornings, and the kind of stillness that lets a man think clearly again. Alma was still staying with me. At first it was awkward, two strangers sharing a house full of memories. But slowly the distance began to fade. She started helping around the house, cooking breakfast, sweeping the porch, even fixing the squeaky cabinet door I'd been meaning to oil for months. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the kitchen window, lost in thought, her eyes swollen from crying the night before. She didn't talk much about Theodore, not at first, but I didn't push. Some lessons need to settle on their own. Then one evening, while I was changing the oil on my old Chevy in the driveway, she came out holding 2 mugs of coffee. She sat beside me on the step, silent for a long time. Finally, she said softly, "You were right, Dad." I didn't look up. "About what?" "Theodore, money, everything. I thought we were building something real, but all he ever cared about was how things looked. I was so blinded by the idea of having a perfect life that I didn't see what it was costing me." I wiped my hands with a rag, set down the wrench, and finally looked at her. We all fall for illusions sometimes. What matters is whether we stay in them. Her eyes shimmered with tears. "He called me last week." I waited. "He's broke. Living with a friend. Said he wanted another chance, that we could start over." I told him no. That last part surprised me, but it also filled me with a kind of quiet pride. She went on. "I told him I finally understood what you meant by earning respect. I want to rebuild. Dad, not just money or things, but myself." I smiled faintly. "Then you've already started." For the first time in months, her smile didn't look forced. It looked real. A week later, she found a job, nothing fancy, just working the front desk at a local repair shop. Irony had a sense of humor, I guess. She came home one night with grease on her hands, laughing that she'd finally gotten a glimpse of what my days used to be like. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed so hard. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Martha, my attorney. "Jazz, remember that ownership claim on Caldwell Executive Catering? The state closed the case. Since the business defaulted, all remaining assets reverted to you. There's a balance of about $8,000. $8,000 wasn't much compared to what I'd lost, but I smiled anyway. "Transfer it to Alma," I said. "Every cent." "Are you sure?" she asked. "That money's rightfully yours." "I know," I said. "But maybe it's time something rightfully becomes hers." That evening, I handed Alma the check. She stared at it, stunned. Dad, I can't take this. You're not taking it, I said. You're earning it. Start something small, something that's yours. No lies this time. No shortcuts. Her lip trembled. You really forgive me? I took a deep breath, looking at the fading light outside. Forgiveness isn't saying what you did was okay, Alma. It's saying I won't let it poison the rest of my life. You're my daughter. That means something, even when it hurts. She broke down then, tears spilling freely as she wrapped her arms around me, tighter than she had in years. For a moment, it felt like all the noise, the anger, the betrayal, it all finally loosened its grip. We sat there for a while, the house quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fan. When she pulled back, she whispered, "You're the strongest man I know." I chuckled. No, just a stubborn old mechanic who finally learned that sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. She smiled, tucking the check into her purse. I'll make you proud, Dad. You already did, I said softly. Weeks later, I passed by a small storefront downtown with a new sign. Alma's Diner, home-style meals, honest prices. The smell of fresh bread drifted into the street. Through the window, I saw her laughing with customers, apron dusted with flour, face glowing with the same light she used to have as a kid. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt peace. Sometimes people need to lose everything to finally find themselves. And sometimes a father's best revenge isn't anger. It's watching his child become the person he always hoped they'd be.